there, I'm Una, and I'm a unicorn. And do you know what unicorns are bad at? Booking meetings. Except for me, of course. My secret? I use Cirrus Insight to schedule all my meetings. That's Cirrus, spelled C-I-R-R-U-S, Cirrus Insight. Cirrus Insight takes all the hassle out of booking and scheduling my meetings, cutting the amount of steps involved to half, if not more. Now, instead of a 43-message deep email thread where everyone's trying to find the right time to meet, I can just send them to a link on my calendar page. From there, anyone who wants to meet with me can see when I'm available and schedule a meeting. It's magic. Like me. And I should know a thing or two about magic. I'm a unicorn after all. But wait, there's more. Do you use Salesforce? If you do, Cirrus Insight can also remove most of the manual data entry involved with updating and maintaining your Salesforce environment. To learn more and start your 14-day free trial, visit cirrusinsight.com. That's Cirrus, spelled C-I-R-R-U-S, cirrusinsight.com. And tell them Una sent you.
Hello everyone, I'm your host and Salesforce MVP, Kristi Campbell. Joining me on the show today is Tom Bassett, Solution Architect at Trig Digital and a Salesforce Answers leader. You can find him on Trailblazer.me at Tom Bassett and on LinkedIn at Tom-Bassett-UK. Today, we're going to talk about Salesforce release readiness and the Trailblazer community, so stay tuned. Hello, and welcome to Cirrus Insights for Admins. I'm your host, Kristi Campbell, the admin here at Cirrus Insight, and I'm joined today by our first international guest, Tom Bassett. Hi, Tom.
Hiya, how are you?
I am lovely. I'm so excited to have you as a superstar answerer in the community. I think you'll be a great resource to talk about our topic today, which is release readiness and leveraging the Trailblazer community, which I will probably refer to as a success community at least once because I'm old school. But tell me a little bit about how you came to Salesforce life and have been getting involved in the community.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me today. So ultimately, my Salesforce career started off as an administrator back in 2018. And from there, I've kind of worked my way up to become a consultant, a lead consultant, and now a senior consultant. So I've been going along the methodical Trailblazer path there, and definitely kind of working with lots of different people throughout my career so far, different types of people. And as well as that, in terms of my actual professional career, I do quite a lot on the answers community, as you said. And right now you might see my face on the leaderboard there as one of the top 10. And also I do some articles for Salesforce Ben as well. So you might have seen some of my content on there too. Very
nice. I started back in 2007 with Salesforce. So my release readiness journey has evolved a bit more since starting in 2018. I wanted to touch on some of the resources as an admin that you can use to get prepared for this 3 times a year release. It used to be, it was a PDF and it was kind of, Mike Garrett-Hole had some tips about printing it and highlighting things and kind of reading the whole thing, which I think is a little bit larger of an ask now. But what have you found as some kind of great ways to get in touch with these changes that are coming 3 times a year?
Yeah, okay. So when I was an administrator myself, I was part of the preparation for these things too. So part of that was ultimately reviewing what was coming. So having a little look at the release notes, but being sure to filter the release notes by the actual products that you're using, because there's no need to look at analytics if you're not using that as a product family. And also part of our process and part of our journey was to also just make sure that there aren't any critical updates that are going to be enforced at the same time. Like, for example, if Salesforce are changing the behavior of email to case or something like that, that would have affected us or me as an admin, it's important to know what that is, where that's coming along, and also maybe taking advantage of kind of testing these things, trying these things out in a sandbox. Because as you may know, Salesforce update the sandboxes first. So, and you can also get your hands on a pre-release org too. And through that, again, you can kind of get to grips with some of these new features and maybe start thinking about how they could apply to you and how they could apply to your use cases.
Yeah, I definitely think the sandbox schedule sometimes feels a little bit like they've gotten better about how they present it in terms of the decisions you need to make, right? So if you aren't able to refresh your sandbox, knowing what pod it's on to then understand if it gets updated, that's gotten a lot more interactive. And I think Salesforce does a great job of making you aware as soon as possible as to when the release notes come out, when that's, you need to make in advance of making decisions about your sandboxes, if it makes sense to spin up a new sandbox or, depending on which types you have to really get in. I find that in some of the communities that I'm in, there's the people who want to use their pre-release orgs and go look for the Easter eggs. And if you have a pre-release org from a past release, it will get the new release again, right? So as long as you keep it active, that kind of continues to be your pre-release org. And so I find that I rely a lot on others to surface those things that they find interesting in those various channels. So there's a certain amount of reactive experience on my part. And then, of course, you've got some wonderful people who do persevere and read through the release notes and are known for putting out, pre-release nuggets, right? Are there any specific that you look for?
Yeah, personally, I would usually go to a website like Salesforce Ben or somewhere like that I've trusted. And from there, I would see particular features in regards to, I don't know, top features for Sales Cloud or Service Cloud. And that's where I would get the information from. It's interesting, actually, you saying about like the treasure hunting, because I'm one of those people that will usually go in and kind of, as soon as Salesforce give you access to the latest pre-release org, or as soon as they kind of open the gates, I am one of those people going through the orgs looking for the treasure. And it's quite interesting because you kind of have to remember what was there before and what's there now to actually be able to identify the difference between the two.
Right.
And it gets a little bit competitive because Salesforce always put the post out some way in advance, so you know when it's coming and when the treasure hunt is starting. And I'm kind of always trying to post something that maybe somebody else hasn't spotted already. And I think maybe that's just me and just the competitive nature of who I am, but it's certainly like a game, and Salesforce certainly treat it like a game because they actually have, within the release readiness group itself, you have the hashtag for the treasure, and ultimately it becomes a game where you're looking for this Salesforce treasure with pretty much kind of complete strangers around the world. You're right. All participating in this game looking for this treasure, but you don't necessarily know each other. The only thing you've got in common is the fact that you're actually using the same system. So that's definitely a part of the release that I really enjoy. And I guess over time, Salesforce have got better, like from back when you started in 2007, it has definitely evolved in the time that I've been using Salesforce. And it's got to a point now where they kind of have things out on like a repeatable process. So that the process is going to start with the pre-release org, and then a couple of weeks or days later, the release notes are going to come out. And then again, a couple of weeks after that is when you actually get access to like the sandbox preview, and then it goes on from there. And I think something that's really helpful, and not just to me as something that's really helpful, and not just as a consultant, but it would definitely would have helped me as an admin, is those release readiness live sessions. And towards the end of the release cycle, Salesforce kind of go into overdrive, and they do these release readiness sessions on a almost daily basis, but they do one per cloud. And I've also seen them before do a whole session on flow, because as we know, Salesforce are going with the flow. So it's certainly interesting to also just kind of get a glimpse of what your org will look like post update, and maybe be inspired a little bit about how you can do things using the new features, or maybe how you can make things simpler now that something else has come out. So that's I guess the thing that I enjoy about the release the most is the collaboration with others in the community and the competitiveness of it. Obviously, Salesforce push out a trailhead badge or two along the way too, which is always good to actually test your knowledge of the release and understand what's coming. But ultimately, we're kind of all in this together. Whether or not we know each other is a different facts. Like we're all using the same system, so we're all kind of working towards the same common goal of understanding what's coming.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, to your point, there's some people who go hunt for those Easter eggs, or even review those early release notes and put out some more general blog updates. You know, you've got Rakesh Gupta does a great top features. The SFXD Discord does the unabridged release notes, which add a little snark to it, which is nice. But you also mentioned you've got some people that do like per cloud kind of focus. So I think that really helps too, to narrow down the large feeling of, you know, having to learn all the things or look at all the release notes. I think can be intimidating to an admin. So I think those are great ways to help. And then, especially as you mentioned, the Release Readiness Live, breaking down per cloud and getting product managers to show you key features, as well as taking live questions and answers, which I think is really awesome. That per feature, you know, cloud, or like you mentioned, the Einstein automation, which includes Flow and Orchestrator now. It's a great way to see the PMs and kind of be able to ask questions and to get yourself prepared for things that might specifically relate to you. I think another cool thing is, as you mentioned, kind of taking those ideas and thinking about how you can optimize your process. So even if it's not something that you want to implement right away, for example, dynamic gauges is a new thing that has, you know, been requested on the Idea Exchange for like 14 years, right? So I'm not ready to, you know, the next day to jump in and change my dashboards, but it's good to be aware of certain things so that even if you're not going to go order all your flows, you know, the next day, right, that you're aware to start moving forward, which I think is an important consideration, right? To your point, there might be critical updates. There might be certain things that are date specific and that you want to test and make sure aren't going to impact your operations. But there's also just a lot of things that being aware of in general, so that, you know, you might have it in your head that you have to do something a certain way, but making sure that you're aware of the current way to do things, right? Even things on the order of execution are changing with this release, with some of the changes for Flow. So just being aware of some of those things that kind of evolve, even if it might not change your day-to-day life, right? So
yeah, no, definitely. Yeah.
So I wanted to touch on, you mentioned the release readiness group on the Trailblazer community, and I wanted to touch on that. So is that something that you engage with really like all year long, or is that kind of your top place that you are going to stay connected with, as you mentioned, other people that are exploring the release? And does that tie into answering questions, or you kind of are doing both? Are the questions a lot about the release, or you just answer questions about all kinds of things?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So with that, the release readiness is just one small kind of segment of the Trailblazer community. And what I focus on personally is the kind of answers wall, as I call it. And then from there, I would ultimately pick up answers from anywhere in the community. So if they've been posted in that group or a different group, or maybe just posted on the main answers section, it's very tempting for me, actually, to kind of answer some of those questions that come in during the release readiness live. And I kind of have to stand back and let the actual product managers answer those, because I don't want to take away their thunder, and that's what they're there for. And I know that Salesforce line them up and get them ready, and that's what they're there to do. So naturally, during a release, you do see an influx of those types of questions, and it's kind of usually around the same type of thing, like, how does flow orchestrated differ from actual flows? Or how does this feature apply to me? Or kind of maybe this release update is going to be activated soon. What does it mean if I've got code that's using an older API version, or whatever it is? You naturally see over time those questions spike during a release time. And there's also a little part of it as well, that I guess something that we haven't touched on yet, in terms of retirement as well, because Salesforce naturally do retire some products, and some products kind of do reach their end of their life at some point. I mean, you don't see very many of those types of questions, but there will still be one or two that maybe is using a legacy version of something that is impacted by it being retired, and is trying to figure out what's a new way of doing things. So, for example, somebody that might have been considering Lightning Sync would probably now be considering Einstein Activity Capture instead. And what's the difference between those two things? So the community kind of has those types of highlights and conversations ongoing throughout the year, but definitely when it becomes part of a release window, you then start to see, as I say, the influx. And usually I can go onto the answers community and actually understand what session has happened that day, because I can see all of the questions are related to Flow, or maybe they're related to Sales Cloud, and I kind of think, okay, so Salesforce must have just done the session on whatever it was.
Got everyone thinking about that. That's so funny. So yeah, I think for any admins that aren't in the group, it's called Release Readiness Trailblazers. It's got the asterisk on the end, and it's probably a featured group in the Trailblazer community for the most part. But I do think it's a great point of reference to start from, especially because as you mentioned, you've got people there posting their Easter eggs when pre-release orgs come out. You've got links in the group information that talk about all the different guides and dates, and anything you might be getting via email as an admin. They're going to link to those posts as well. One thing that we talked about that I think some people don't know about is the release matrix, which I think actually started as somebody making it like for themselves at Salesforce, and it kind of became a thing that now people wanted it after it got passed around a bit. So it's an actual Excel document that allows you to filter for, you know, different clouds and features, so that just another way to kind of organize yourself. I've seen some people like import it into an org to have like objects and records to actually track the things about a release that they want to manage, right? So, you know, depending on, and then of course, as you mentioned, there's a link to the Trailhead modules and the schedules of the official Salesforce things that they're doing. So you've kind of got a good balance of the members of the group posting things, and then the, you know, the actual information for the official Salesforce stuff. And that's on the groups piece. So that is great conversation to follow. And then we also talked a little bit about ideas, which I think is another kind of interesting piece in the community. Have you posted any ideas before?
Yeah, I have. I think so I think I'm actually responsible for about 80 to 100 ideas right now.
Wow.
So I definitely, so my day-to-day is building the system out for different customers, and if there's something that can't be done, I would definitely be the type of person that goes out and posts an idea for that exact thing, and then I will share those with my own kind of social internal networks as well, and get people to upvote. And it's good as well in terms of what we're seeing from Salesforce. in regards to the trend and the importance of the idea exchange, as it was formerly called, because historically there was that kind of frustration that there was a number of ideas that have been out there for a long while and they haven't necessarily been addressed, or maybe not even replied to in some cases. And Salesforce are trying to improve that and flip the problem on its head a little bit with the prioritization rounds that you get a couple of times a year as well now, where you get given some virtual coins, and trust Salesforce to make something like a game. They do it so well. You get your virtual coins and you spend them on the ideas that they've selected for the prioritization. So that's always good, and you can actively influence there in your own way what is coming up next. We're actually starting to see some ideas that have come from a round of prioritization, have won that particular round, and you're actually now starting to see them through to completion too. So that's definitely nice to see, and good to know that some of the ideas are being addressed by Salesforce and are actually making their way into core product.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting, like, another approach to looking at the release notes, right? Looking at things that came from ideas. Because again, those are use cases that people had that they couldn't meet. I think it's kind of funny over the years to get updates on things I requested 2 jobs ago, right? That made sense then, or something I needed for then that, gets comments or continues to get upvotes. So I know on the actual records, you certainly can upvote things, but you don't have a bank, then you can upvote everything all day long if you want, right? So I think the prioritization has been a really good next step into really kind of put you in the seat of a PM to make you think about, if you only have so many development points, right? Like, what would you kind of put your attention on, has been really cool. So I think that kind of, again, is another facet of the community that can be interesting for people to engage in, whether it's, supporting ideas, or, like you said, encountering something that you can't do and building an idea that might end up getting support, and then seeing those things through all the way into the release.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it'll be interesting to see where Salesforce go with that, and that as a concept, purely because this kind of gives us a little bit of a glimpse into what their teams are currently working on, because the ideas that come up for prioritization are for those teams that have capacity to develop those new features. Mm-hmm. So a recent round was quite strongly focused on NPSP, and the Salesforce comment or reply was purely because so many of the other ideas were around core product or around reports or dashboards. Those teams were already working really hard to deliver those. So it kind of gives you a little bit of a bird's eye view and like an appreciation of what everything is, an appreciation of what Salesforce is doing all at the same time in all of the different arenas, because I don't even know how many clouds they have now. I think it's probably got to be 20 plus different clouds. Right. So there's obviously various different teams behind the scenes that support making those ideas part of the core platform. And it's just interesting to just see what happens behind the scenes and have your little bit of influence there with your virtual coins too as well. Is always fun.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, these little kind of pockets of the community, right? We've kind of talked about groups, especially around release readiness, but there's groups for all kinds of different topics, right? So if you're trying to work on flow, you've got a Flownatics group, I'm sure, that's answering questions, right? Sometimes those things are in a Slack group or in Discord or, in a variety of other places, right? But I really like that Salesforce supplies this structure for the community, we mentioned like group conversation, whether even like your local user groups as well, and community groups, the idea exchange to, allow you to have that voice. And as you mentioned, to prioritize. And then I do want to circle back to the answers community, because I think that's a really interesting, over the years have developed other kind of communities that I talk to. And so I think that's my habit, is to go to those to ask questions first. So I'm kind of curious, as a top 10 answerer, what kind of users or questions do you get? A lot of introductory questions? Do you get a lot of super specific niche questions? Like what kinds of things are people reaching out for help for in the answers community?
Yeah. Okay. So before I go into that, I think it adds a little bit of flavor here to explain that when somebody goes into a particular group, so they might jump into the Experience Cloud group and ask a question. When I go to the main answers board, that shows there amongst all of the other questions. So it never used to work quite like that, but now it does, and it all feeds into one kind of feed of unanswered questions.
I didn't know that. So instead, when you're in a group, instead of posting to the group, if you do ask a question, then it goes into the questions. I did not know that. Yeah.
So as a result of that, I get a lot of different types of questions. There's always the general influx or flow of Trailhead related questions, like I can't pass this challenge. That type of thing comes up quite a lot. And usually it's the same type of issues that people are having. So the power of the community is, with a quick search, you can usually find somebody else that's had the same problem and get some kind of idea or inspiration onto how to fix that, if it's a particular module or project that you're working towards. And another part of that is you then get the type of people that maybe they're full-time admins, and maybe they're a solo admin and they're struggling to understand. Yeah, exactly. I think we've all been there, struggling to understand a particular feature, or maybe they've built something and it doesn't quite work, and they don't really have enough knowledge to understand why. So they're just a little bit stuck. And I think the really empowering thing about the community is that I can be sat here in UK and help somebody on the other side of the sea in America or wherever they are, and have a really influential impact and positive impact on their day by just making something easier for them to understand. And sometimes I actually have quite a back and forth between people, and I kind of enjoy that, weighing up what's right here and what's wrong, because as you know, with something Salesforce, there isn't necessarily a right answer or a wrong answer.
There's just one answer.
Yeah, exactly. And it's quite funny sometimes. I'll answer a post and somebody else will answer a post with completely different suggestions. So it's definitely useful to have those different voices there on the community, because I might give a suggestion and somebody else may then add their own, which is maybe better for you. It works if it's your business processes better, or it helps your users a little bit more. So there's definitely that type of thing that's posted there quite a lot. And ultimately, sometimes I kind of break it down and I can kind of get that some people are really struggling and they're almost overwhelmed by it as well. Right. So I kind of look after that emotional side of the question as well, or at least I try to, and I kind of own the question for them and reassure them that I will try my best to help them and to get an answer. And in some cases, actually, I've kind of gone above and beyond, and they've requested something really niche or something particular, like a flow that does a certain thing. And I've actually just gone out into my own playground, built the flow, and given them a step-by-step screenshot instructions on how to actually do it. Obviously, you can't do that for every question. Right. And I mean, I would love to if that was an actual full-time job, but you can tell sometimes when people are kind of a little bit overwhelmed, and you can make that positive change, that difference to them. And I think that's ultimately what the community is about. Yes, it's gamified. Yes, there is a leaderboard, but it's actually just about helping others and sharing, and sometimes just weighing up different options. Like quite often there'll be somebody posting and they're looking for form options, and there will be, I don't know, 20 or 30 people that flood into the post and say, I've used form assembly, it's great, or I've used form stack, I preferred it, or various different options. Different voices can really have power there, and certainly help the poster kind of get the best solution for them as well. So something else that I think would just be useful to kind of roll back on in terms of actually release readiness is the trailhead side of it as well. And talking about, in particular, obviously we have the release highlights that are published every release, but naturally with Trailhead, there's usually a badge on it. You can usually find it somewhere.
Right.
There is actually one out there for release readiness in itself. And it actually goes through, like, maybe as an admin or whatever your role is, what you would do to prepare for said release. And part of that usually when you're an admin, you don't necessarily have users that are working 24/7, and Salesforce time the release on purpose, so it happens in the small hours of the morning usually. But there are some use cases where you do actually need to think, I've got users that are going to be using a system at that point, so I need to tell them that they can't get in during that window. And also maybe I've got something that is going to be impacted by the release, or maybe I just want to give users a way of just making them aware that a release is coming. And as a result, let us know if there's any issues afterwards. So I think that part of release planning is really important too. And if it's just a templated email or something you send out and say, hey, the release is coming. As a result, the system is going to be offline between this window. And if you notice anything weird post-release, then let us know and we'll take a look at it for you. I think that just kind of reassures the users as well, because if something's changed in terms of UI-wise in the release, that otherwise they're kind of going to be sat there thinking, like, what's happened? What have I done?
Is it me? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that side of it too. And there's also the testing side of it as well. So if you have Salesforce handling something in a different way, then that's really important too, because if you have some crucial business process that's going to be changed by a pending critical update or a product retirement or maybe just a new feature or something, it's really important that you keep the show on the road and that post-release it actually still works. So I think that's definitely a little tidbit for you as well there.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I think the leveraging the resources that you have, again, that are, like you said, helping you learn how to prepare and actually opening that channel for your users to have that communication path just in case anything comes up that you don't catch. I definitely agree is key. And then, leveraging the community for questions that you do have, whether you're a solo admin or you just within your team aren't sure about something, or as you mentioned, learning other people's use cases. I even think for new admins that are training, looking at the questions in the answers community can be really helpful to learn how to solve things yourself, right? These are actual business use cases that people are coming up with that they have questions about. So just like Trailhead, I mean, at least then you can check your answers, right? But it's giving you scenarios that you're building something to address. The super badges certainly kind of leave you a little bit more to figure things out. But like you mentioned, there's probably a few different ways to solve problems. So look at the type of things that people are asking that you might be facing as a similar admin. And, like you said, building those things out and trying to solve those problems, whether you actually reply or not, right? But just it's a great way to me to get use cases, I think can be really interesting for someone who's trying to learn maybe about a new cloud or something new that you can be in a playground and can be trying to learn. Although, of course, if you do solve the problem, or if there's wonderful people like you that are taking the time to build out a flow or to dig into something, then that's also a great resource for new admins and those of us just running up against something we're not sure about. So awesome. Well, I think we've got some great ideas here about preparing for release, and we're in release season. So we'll be in Easter egg season for the next release, because it all just cycles through, right? So I did want to finish up with our ad minute. So when you're taking an ad minute for yourself, something that maybe you've read or watched or maybe even written recently that might be interesting for our listeners. I know for me, I found a great YouTube video by SFDC Panther that is about using Flow to create opportunity contact roles. So he's got a great Salesforce Flow Builder series, and we'll link to the one I was looking at in the show notes, but it was basically almost exactly what I needed to do. And so it's really helpful to see what variables they're building, like what the end flow kind of looks like literally almost exactly what I need to have a model. Yeah. So as I'm, getting more and more involved with flow, just kind of understanding those concepts. And I don't want to build it in Workflow or Process Builder because I know I need to go with the flow. So that was a great resource. He's got an entire YouTube series about different flow use cases. So that's been really helpful to me this week. How about you?
Yeah, so it's actually funny you mentioned flows, because I think there's quite a lot in the community just around flows and kind of almost some people being scared of them. So I think it's definitely useful to break that barrier down that people have. And I've written a couple of articles for Salesforce Ben, and one of them was in regards to some real life flow inspiration, as I called it. And it kind of gives off the wall use cases that have had actual customers that have kind of stretched the limits of what flow can do. And also as part of that, there were some top tips there in regards to best practices, things to do, things to not do, just to make sure that your flow runs as expected, and ultimately to just utilize flow as a tool going forward, because as we know, it's the future of Salesforce automation. So it's important to get that type of experience and kind of share ideas and real life, as I say, flow inspiration with other people too.
It's like flow inspiration.
Yeah. Pretty sure I'm just making up words at this point, but it's definitely very important.
I mean, we love a pun and a made up word on this podcast series. So awesome. Well, we will link to that as well. And thank you so much, Tom, for joining us and sharing your experience with managing release readiness and engaging with the community. And of course, for all you do for the Answers community to help all the other users out there. And it was great chatting with you.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of Serious Insights for Admins. Don't forget to get your 14-day free trial and free yourself from the drudgery of manual data entry. Start now by visiting cirrusinsight.com. That's Cirrus, CIRRUS, insight.com. And I'll see you next time.